We're watching ChillyBoy Productions. I'm Larry, ChillyBoy Chillson, and this is my spoiler discussion on Knock at the Cabin. Now, before we get into this discussion, go ahead and click that subscribe button down below so that you can chill with me on each and every one of my latest videos. Look at the Cabin is a 2023 mystery thriller. Written and directed by M. Night Shyamalan, the film is an adaptation of the 2018 novel The Cabin at the End of the World, written by Paul G. Tremblay. So before we jump into today's discussion, here's your warning. We're going to have both book spoilers and film spoilers throughout this video. I had a major problem with the undertoned messaging throughout the film, but felt I couldn't fully express my issues in the spoiler-free review I posted. But if you want to hear just my plain thoughts on the film without spoilers, head over to the spoiler-free review, and then you can come back here if you want more in-depth discussion on why I had specific issues. So if you haven't seen the film specifically, that's what we're mainly going to be talking about. So you've been warned. Spoilers ahead. If you have both seen the film and read the book, you already know that M. Night Shyamalan did make some pretty significant changes to this story, particularly completely changing the entire ending portion of the novel. While the first half of the film stays pretty faithful to what the novel sets up, in honesty, Shyamalan's ending gives the audience a more definitive answer to our film's overall mystery. The question of, are these people telling us the truth? The novel leaves this pretty open ended. In said novel, Wen actually dies in a tussle between Leonard and our couple. She gets accidentally shot and dies. But ultimately, our couple is told that her sacrifice was not a willing one and it doesn't count, basically. But they still have to kill one or the other to prevent the apocalypse. Once more, our couple refuses, saying that they don't care to sacrifice to a god that won't accept Wen's death as sacrifice enough, and they ride off into the sunset. We don't know if the apocalypse has been prevented, if the stuff that was happening was telegraphed, if it was coincidence, what the case might be. It just ends there. Now, in the film, Wen never gets shot. He actually lives to see the entire end of the film. However, it is revealed that our four intruders represent the four horsemen of the apocalypse and that their passing of judgment on humanity was accurate. They are more than just religious zealots. Vision is truth, and God is requiring this sacrifice in order to prevent the apocalypse. Because once our couple does finally make the choice and willingly sacrifice one of the two men, we see visually that everything clears up. We see the newsreels of all of these disasters undoing, and humanity has seemingly been saved. While the remaining husband and daughter ride off into the sunset, they have made the sacrifice to ultimately save humanity. And ultimately, I believe that Shyamalan's changed ending that gives a more definitive answer also gives the film an unintended message of condemnation. While Shyamalan's script continuously reassures both our on screen couple and us as audience members, this couple just happened to be at the wrong cabin at the wrong time, basically. That this was not targeted and there was no underlying malice to the decision in who needed to make this horrific sacrifice based on their identity. Unfortunately, with Shyamalan's religious changes to the story, it does feel very targeted. So while it may have just been a case of whoever's at the cabin in the books, that ultimately rings hollow when applied to the story that Shyamalan ultimately told. So, just looking at the base premise here, the four horsemen of the apocalypse approach two men and their daughter with the opportunity to prevent said apocalypse if they willingly and collectively sacrifice a member of their family. The ideas of these horsemen of the apocalypse coinciding with the plagues of the Old Testament in Revelations, film takes on a symbolic gesture of requiring the breakup of queer family to prevent humanity's doom. Continuing throughout the story, humanity is judged each time the couple chooses their love and not to end their relationship. It's important to note that this impossible choice is not a novel idea to this story, and it's actually an idea that more so tests basic human instinct. The test to see if humans are willing to surrender what they love personally on a smaller scale for the greater good of humankind at large. We've seen this type of base premise many a times at this point. Even here, in this context, it does still serve that base ideology. However, when you add in the ideology of the Old Testament and you plug in a couple that comes from a group that has largely been discriminated against and persecuted by the words of the Old Testament, it brings on a much more insidious underbelly. However, adding the ideology of the Old Testament judgment and plagues over said concept and applying it to a group that has been historically demonized using the Old Testament adds a layer of symbolism, an additional sense of judgment would not be present with a heterosexual couple, particularly a same race heterosexual couple. Each time this couple chooses their love and their life, their gay love is literally dooming humanity. Film, in turn, shows a literal representation of choosing gay love in the face of the word of God, demanding this union be ended, and how that is the doom of humanity. Now, in any case, for this story to work, when you add in the four horsemen of the apocalypse, the couple that is chosen for this sacrifice does become a literal stand in for the sins of humanity. All of this subtext isn't present if the couple that the religious zealots choose or stumble upon isn't same sex. The story now takes on an entirely new sub meaning based on the preachings of the Old Testament, in which this very religious ideology is based in. Having the persecutors be religious zealots to a group that continues to be persecuted by religious viewpoints creates an entirely new condemnation in the text. And it is made more clear. Shyamalan sides on the side of religion as we move throughout, as one of the couple continues to spout logic in the face of religious belief and ultimately is proven wrong, is proven delusional as we move throughout. That brings us back to the film's alternate changed ending and how that ending solidifies this anti-LGBTQ subtext. As I just mentioned, Shyamalan picks a side. Religious zealots are right. Apocalypse is real, and the only way to prevent the ending of humanity is to destroy queer love, represented by this queer relationship before us. This is left open. If we are not sure if it's real or not, then it is left much like real life, open to each to believe as they see fit. But the film takes a stand, and unfortunately, the definitive stance paints the overarching allegory in a tinge of anti-LGBTQ ideology. Though I don't believe this was M. Night Shyamalan's intent per se, was an unfortunate subtext that came at the consequence of his added religious emphasis and new ending. That's why I have such an issue with the overall messaging of M. Night Shyamalan's Knock at the Cabin. Yes, it could be just a fun, horrifying sci fi horror. My viewpoint, if you don't want to create an anti LGBTQ message throughout this film, you have to make the choice of either keep the religious component or keep the same sex couple as the target. You cannot have both, because once you have both, this is the product that ultimately comes. If you keep the religious component and have an opposite sex straight couple, it loses this subtext. Once more specifically, a same race opposite gendered couple. Or if you leave it open ended, if you leave the religious components out of the story, or if you leave it open ended as the book did, and you have just religious zealots without the ultimate condemnation of God coming through, and keep the queer couple at the center, then it could be a more realized story that we could see here. You can think it's a hate crime. You can think that these people did just choose at random based on their visions, but we don't get the definitive answer of God literally making this condemnation. And in turn, finally, yes, the four people who represented the four horsemen of the apocalypse did just show up to the cabin that their visions showed them. They, as individual people, may have been acting out of pureness to their vision. However, in this story, there is clearly a higher power that showed them their visions. The higher power is what told them to go to that cabin on this day, at this time, and present this unspeakable decision to a queer family, leading back to the fact that the entire film, unfortunately, is tinged in religious anti LGBTQ ideology. This is my personal interpretation and analysis on Knock at the Cabin and how it ultimately comes across as a condemnation of LGBTQ love and a message that ending LGBTQ love is the way to save humanity. In many ways, I think my interpretation is quite literal, but in others, I think it takes on a much more insidious underbelly to what the messaging really was here in this film, and how M. Night Shyamalan's ending specifically founded that ideology that may or may not have even been present with the original novel. If you enjoyed this video, this analysis, this spoiler discussion, please leave a like down below and subscribe to the channel so that you are always up to date on all of my latest videos. I know many are going to probably call me all type of names. They're probably going to really disagree with everything I had to say. Please disagree respectfully if your brain is able. In the comment section down below, leave your thoughts, leave your comments. Does anyone else out there agree with what I've said here? I'd like to hear your take in the comments or over on Twitter. I love you all so much for your continued support. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.